recording. So foundation walls are walls, of course, and we know how to create walls, how to draw them. We know how to define their top constraint and their bottom constraint, right? Does it make sense how you define a wall, all the different layers within the wall system? Okay. We know that when we want to create a new wall, there's not a new wall button, right? You have to select an item closest to whatever wall you want to generate. Then you have to duplicate it. You have to rename it. You have to edit it, and then you can use it, right? Process we're going to use for a lot of things throughout the semester.
The core boundaries are always just default in there.
Yes, because you have to have a structure for any wall that you create.
Right.
Essentially, yeah. And it doesn't matter what it is, right? You could say, I'm only generating a glass shower wall, and the structure is an inch thick glass or whatever.
And that would just be sandwiched between your core boundaries.
Right.
So that's just your structure.
Right. Yep, exactly. All right, so we've talked about walls, kind of from level 1 up, but what about from our level 1 down, right? Basement walls. There is, let's see, hold on one second. I have to look this up because I think it's the best way of describing it. And this is something that I sought out and had to somewhat define for myself, and it's, let's see. Oh, this is a good one, but not exactly what I was looking for. Okay, well, let's do this. So let me show you something here real quick. So we have on our ribbon here, we have our walls, right? And you'll notice we have architectural walls and we have structural walls, okay? And, what is the difference between these two things, right? That's what I want to define here. And I think the best way to define it is, when I was searching out this topic, because it's kind of convoluted, honestly, the difference between the two. And I was looking for a specific thread that I had found that defined them. Here are some differences, right? The first is structural walls can be scheduled and controlled by visibility graphics. And then structural walls have analytic model parameters that can be analyzed by third-party structural analysis programs. So basically, when you are in Revit, if you go to the structure tab here, we have walls. And if you go to architecture and you drop down, we also have walls, structural walls here, okay? So those structural walls, those are generally going to be used by structural engineers, right? And I think the best way I can sort of explain why we don't use them and that structural engineers use them is, I like to compare it to layers in AutoCAD, right? When you're working in AutoCAD and you name your layers, you name all of the architectural layers, which show design elements. You name them with an A in front of them, right? AE-wall, AE-lighting, AE-glazing, whatever, right? If a structural engineer is using AutoCAD, when they name their layers, it's SE-wall, SE-ceiling, or whatever they're naming it, or whatever they're drawing. And the reason they do that is to separate who has drawn them, and that is for liability issue, right? So that you know that these are architectural, they're for design intent, and that the architect has drawn them. And these are structural, the structural engineer has drawn them, and they are responsible for those structural elements, okay? So that is the same thing that is happening in Revit, right? We have architectural walls that are drawn by the architect/designer, right? And they are to show design intent, location of interior, exterior walls, okay? And then we have the structural walls, which are placed by the engineer, and they're actual structural elements that the structural engineer is responsible for, right? And usually they're going to be in the same spot as the architectural walls, right? Yeah, because they're going to respond to the design intent, but they're separate elements, okay? Now, so, you look at the walls and you think, well, they don't look different. Other than being a, quote, structural element, what is the difference between the two, right? So number one, liability, right? We want to stick with architectural elements unless we're engineers. And then 2, there's other information contained in structural walls that can then be used by other people to model and do different things, okay? There was also, and I wish I could find the thread where I found this, but it said something to the effect of architectural foundation walls are actual foundations. And this is just a play on words, but structural foundation walls are the foundation for a wall. Everybody's like,
Wait, go back and do the first one again.
Architectural walls are actually a foundation, and
Right.
structural walls are foundations for a wall. Whatever that means, right? And so that is kind of the, Revit definition between the two, right? And the same thing, you're going to see the same differences in the footing system for in Revit. And we do, the way I teach you to do footings, they're going to be architectural footings. They're not going to be structural footings, right? And I know that, so the structural elements are easier to use. Let me just say that. It's easier to use the structural elements because you click, 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 and they all pop in, right? And you're like, oh, that's so easy. Why would I ever use this other direction? And it's because of how these elements are kind of defined and used in models, right? So even though structural elements are easier to use, don't use them. Stick with architectural elements, okay? That's my lecture for that. Okay, so let's talk about foundation walls and how we're going to generate them, because you guys obviously have, a foundation system you're going to have to put into your models, okay? So I'm going to, let's do this. I'm just going to draft a little bit. Give me like 10 minutes, and I'm going to draft a little bit, and I'm going to draft off of this floor plan. Okay. Here's our, you recognize this little beauty, right?
A little bit.
Okay. I'm going to create an arc.
My house is supposed to look like?
What is this? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to create a wall here. And so I inserted that image. If you didn't catch that, I went to insert, and I clicked on image, and I found the image, and I inserted it into my Revit space here, right? My drawing board. I can grab it and kind of center it a little bit if I want to. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up. We'll do this one more time for those of you that are maybe not quite, where we are here. I'm going to scale it up, and I'll hurry and draw the walls inside, and then we'll do the basement walls just to kind of show you, how to go about it on your actual project. So I'm going to come here to architecture, wall, and I'm just going to stick with a generic wall, right? You guys are going to create wall types and all that fancy stuff. Finish face, exterior.
So for this first part of the assignment, doing the fit, do we need to have the wall types that we made in it already, or so should we have used our new wall types that we made for our level?
Yes.
Okay, it's just not a generic one, and you just want to see that added later. You want them actually in there for
Yes.
the assignment.
Yes. Yes, because now you know how to do that, right? You know how to generate those, so you
Right.
can apply them. Yes. Yep.
That speaks theory.
All right, so let's scale this, right? To scale this up, I create an element, even though it's not the right size, and I'm going to use that element to scale this object up correctly. So I click on scale, and I'm going to define that first element, click, and then we are going to make it 16'2". There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to look at my levels here. Let's go to an elevation. I've got level 1 and level 2. We want that at 9 foot. And then we are going to create another level, top of wall. Or were they 10 foot or 9 foot? I don't remember. 9 foot? Okay. So this one's going to be 18 feet, essentially. And then we'll create the basement down here. And we'll make that DI dimension. Okay, and I think, no, I don't want that. So that's going to be negative 9 foot. Looks good. Delete. Okay. So first thing that I've done that is incorrect is I have not constrained the top and bottom constraints, right? So level 1 up to level 2. can always go back. Okay, there it is. I'm going to WT, window tile. I'm going to have this little guy. Let's go to my north elevation though. WT. I have that little guy hanging out there, so I can, there's nothing there yet, but I'm going to start drawing, okay? And I'm going to click on that wall, and do you remember this? Create similar, CS. Okay. I click on the wall, I choose create similar, click, and it will start generating that item that I just picked. It's like a match properties kind of, but as you're drafting, right? I'm just gonna start drafting along here. Define this, you know, I'm not being as careful as you guys would, but
Yeah.
there you go. He doesn't give me any confidence. Okay. Now, I look at this and I think, how does that work, right? Well, I'm gonna go to Canvas, hold on. And if you guys looked, let's see, in that assignment, let's see, 2350, right? And we go to assignments, go to the residence here, right? There's a bunch of images here, of course, right? So I can, if I'm questioning what something is going to look like, well, here's a link. I'm going to go to the link first, right? So we can kind of see how that works. Okay, so that's kind of a, and there's some other images. There we go. Okay. All right, so there, this is likely, we're going to maybe create similar, and we'll jog it back a little bit. I'll come back to it. Trim, TR, click, click, there we go. We'll work on this a little bit later. We're going to do an opening in that wall, okay? Because it looks like, you know, there's a little wing wall, right? And then it's open over to that main wall. So we want to have kind of this structure, the little, maybe there's a piece of wall or a beam right there. And we want to show that, but we want it open beneath. And the way we're going to achieve that later on is with an opening in our wall, okay? All right, so I have this, and I'm going to do some interior walls. So I grab my, we'll do some narrower, you'll have a different wall type, but I'll grab my interior walls, and I'm just going to draw these. Here we go. Looks good. And again, right, they're not perfect, and it panics a lot of people, but again, you somewhat have to go back and edit these, right? So I generally got this where it needed to be, but I'm gonna, you know, do that. And then in addition to that, I'm going to add some dimensions in a second, right? So I'm gonna draw these little guys, and this looks like a closet wall area. Okay, oh, let's do some more of those. Click, create similar, CS. And everybody is panicking. They're like, it's not right, it's not precise, right? But I'm generally getting everything in there, and then I'll come back and make it precise. I'll revise it. And we've got maybe a closet or something happening there. Okay. Here we go. Okay. And I go into my 3D view, of course, and I look at it, and it's generally the way I want it. Now it's time for me to go back and perfect it, right? So AL aligned, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to align these elements so that they match up, and then I'm going to grab them and drag them to align, right? Now I want to make sure that maybe I don't quite know the exact dimension there, right? This one it's 15 by 16 foot 1, so I can get it pretty close. But I'm going to add some dimensions, DI, dimension, and I'm going to, oops, tab, and I'm going to dimension some of these so that I get a good sense of pretty close, right? So that one's going to be 15 foot, and this one right here is going to be, right, 16 foot 1, right? And I would string these dimensions all the way down and get it as perfect as I could, right? DI, dimension. There we go, the hallway. Looks like it's maybe 4'6", something to that effect, right? And we move forward, okay? That's as far as I'm going to go right now with that. But that's how I would generate the main level floor plan, okay? And again, you'll see me constantly flipping back and forth between views, which is, you know, just gone to be habit now, right? In AutoCAD, we couldn't do that, you know, but in Revit we can, we should. All right, so now it's time to generate some foundation walls, right? And, you know, again, if you look under the structural tab, we have structural walls that we can put in there, but we're not going to use that, even though it's very easy. The footings over here, there's footings right here, easy to use, but number one, they're not our elements to use. Number two, they may be easy going in, but to manipulate them is actually more difficult than the walls. So we're just gonna go with what I'm gonna show you today. All right, so I've got my levels here. Looks good. I'm going to come down here and change the scale, maybe to like 1/4 inch. There we go. That's how I want to see it. Okay. Now, I'm going to add the foundation walls. And the way the foundation walls function, you know, these walls generally, when you draw walls from the main level, they assume that you are moving upward, right? So you draw your walls and Revit assumes you're moving from this point upwards, okay? With the foundation wall, it assumes you're moving from this point downward, okay? That's how foundation walls, quote, real foundation walls are defined. And when I say real foundation walls, I say that because when I go to architecture wall and I look here, I can see that I have an actual foundation wall defined here, okay? If I click on that to use it, I hit edit type, I hit edit, it shows the structure is cast in place concrete. Let's make it, we'll leave it at 1 foot, that's fine. And down here under function, it says foundation. So that is showing me it's a foundation wall. This is also where you can choose interior, exterior. Oh, they have a soffit wall now. I didn't realize they put that in there. Soffit, retaining, or core shaft. Okay, so it is defined as a foundation wall. And with that definition, it grows from this point downward, right? So I'm going to hit OK. The way that I am going to work through creating my foundation walls, let me go back to an elevation view, WT, window tile, right? Is I'm going to start on the main level. And I'm going to start on the main level because I want to work my way down, okay? And there's a couple of funny things that start happening as I work on the main level and create my foundation walls below that, right? And you'll see what happens. So let me work through creating some foundation walls, and then we'll talk about, you know, what's happening. So I'm going to click on wall, architectural, choose my foundation wall. Okay, and immediately I look here and it says from level 1 we're going to go down -12 feet, right? And it doesn't have a constraint down here, right? This is somewhat Revit's default way of defining that foundation wall in the negative, right? Which is the same thing as not having a top connected wall that's moving upward, right? Or Revit just defines it as 20 feet tall, right? In this case, it just takes it down to -12 feet. But we're going to change this just a little bit, right? So instead of it being defined as the base constraint being level 1 and going -12 and the top constraint going up to level 1, we are going to change the base constraint to the basement. So I'm going to name this level 4 basement. Okay. We'll name level 1 main level. Okay. So wall foundation, come on. There we go. So here we want the base constraint to be our basement. So that's the base of the wall, even though it's growing downward. So the base is going to be basement. Our base offset, we're not going to have a base offset. And the top constraint is still going to be our main level. So with these, you're going to have to change things a little bit, okay? Now here's the hard part in this whole system. It's not hard to draw them, but what's weird about these for me is that I draw them in the main level and they grow beneath my floor plan. And what's weird about that is that I get an error in Revit and it says the elements that you just created are not able to be seen in the level you're currently viewing them in. So it tells you, hey, these things are moving downward and you can't see them in your main level floor plan, okay? But the point of having this over here is that when I start creating them, you'll start seeing them generate over here. So in fact, let me go to a 3D level or 3D view, and we'll start watching what happens. Okay.
How do you split the screen again?
WT. All right, so I'm going to choose my little picker. You can draw them any way you want. Again, as I start drawing them, I just get them generally where they need to be, and I have to go back and I have to revise them, right? It's just kind of how it works. So I click on the pick tool, and I'm just going to start creating walls, and they turn orange and it errors, and it says none of these elements are viewable, and you're like, that's okay, right? I'm just going to keep going, and I'm just going to keep generating these all the way around my,
It's just all you're doing is clicking on that line.
yep, click, click. Oh, and I put 2 on the in the same spot because I forgot where I started, right? Okay, so in doing that, I do get an error. In doing that, I don't see the elements immediately being generated, right? But as you can see over here in the 3D view, they were generated, okay? Now, when I look at this, obviously they're not in the right spot in the wall. So as I was generating them, they probably were generating at midpoint, right? So they are slightly off where they need to be, okay? And so what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to align them with the upper level, right? I'm going to have to revise them again, okay? So I'm going to use the Align tool in 3D to align these. So I'm going to AL Align, or I could go to Modify Align. And I wanted to show you this because Align isn't just a 2D tool, right, to line things up in floor plan. I can come in here and I can click the face of this plane of this wall, click. And I can, and you'll notice I'm selecting kind of the boundary, right, of those walls, click. Great. And I orbit about, AL, click, click, AL, click, click, AL. And you'll notice, say, if I, hover here, nothing really, right? In the middle, in the field of the wall, I don't get a selection. And if I come over too close to here, it shows right here. Do you see how I'm selecting the end of that wall that's coming this direction? And I want to get the field of that wall. So I hover over that boundary, click, click. Get real fast at this, right? Click, 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 click. Oop, wrong, click. Oop, oh, nope. AL, click, click. I hover around, click, click. Okay. So we don't know how to do floors yet. We don't know how to do our roof system yet, but we do now, we're seeing the upper level walls, the interior and exterior, and we're seeing the lower level walls now, right? Which is really nice. So you just kind of want to look at them because they're so nice and pretty, right? Now I can go over here to my project browser, and I can go to basement, and there's my cute little basement, right? Okay, so there are things in the basement that need to be drawn, right? We need to draw those. We'll talk about that in a second. But we do have one more thing that I want to show you how to draw in here, and that's the footings, right? The footings are going to sit right beneath the foundation wall. So let's draw those, and I'm going to show you how I go about drawing the footings. I'm going to use a wall system again. And I want to reiterate, right, that we have the structural footings and foundations that we can use, but I just don't suggest it, right? I know, so Kevin teaches this class. I know he just lets them do that, but I just think you get into issues when you do that. So I keep them very separate. Okay, but here's my problem. I don't have another level below my basement to assign my footings with, right? And so I'm gonna have to create another level down here. So when you look at my drawings that I do in Revit, I've got a basement level, and I have a, well, I do my slab a little different too, but I have a top of footing and a bottom of footing, right? So I can generate these footing walls just like I did the basement walls, okay? And so I'm going to add another level here. Architecture, level, and there we go. And that's going to be however thick the footing is going to be, right? And I'm going to accentuate it here. We're just going to leave it, well, 3 feet's kind of excessive, maybe. Let's do 1'6", just so we can see them. Kind of too thick, but there we go. and we'll call that, okay. Okay. And of course I always like to kind of bring these in, make them so I can see them, not too close, not too far away. That's pretty good. All right, so now I have my bottom of footing, and these have the same relationship. You know, like when I created my basement level walls, I was in main level and I generated them down, right? And I'm going to do the same thing here. I have my basement level and I'm going to generate my footings down, okay? Even though those footings are only going to be a foot tall or whatever, right? Now, the trick to a footing is that I'm going to generate a new footing wall, and that footing wall is going to be pretty thick, right? Because the footing is going to be maybe triple the size of the foundation wall, right? So if I have my foundation wall like this, let me just draw a little image. Sometimes it dawns on me, not everybody knows what this means, right? I've got my footing wall, or my foundation. There's my footing, okay? And then our upper level joists, right? They sit somewhere up in here. And then I've got my roof system that comes like that, right? So what we're drawing, there's our foundation wall, and this will be our footing, okay? And this, you know, the ground will be somewhere around here, and then you'll have your floor slab that kind of comes in there, okay? So this foundation wall, you know, in our setting it was 12 inches. Let's make this really thick, whatever, you know, let's make it, well, not really thick, but maybe 24 inches, okay? So it'll be double the size of the foundation wall, okay? All right, so to do that, again, I need to create a new wall type. There's not a brand new wall type button, so I take a wall that I already have close to what I want to create, and I hit edit type, and I hit duplicate, and we'll call this foundation, but we'll call this maybe like a 24-inch footing. And I like to still have it in the foundation, you know, designation, because they're, you know, they're a system that works together, right? So we hit edit, and the concrete is the same, but instead of being the thickness being 1 foot, it's going to be 2 foot. So I preview that. Let's make it 3 feet. I want to make this evident. 3 feet. Okay. Okay. And I've just okay, well, and I accidentally changed that wall type, right? Match properties, MA. Click on this wall, click on that wall, and it goes back to where it needs to be. Match properties. I know, right? Okay, so now I'm going to close my other views. I'm going to go to my basement, right? And if you remember, my basement, my footing is going to go from my basement down to my bottom of footing, right? So I'm going to control tab, and I can switch between views, right? There's a quick way of switching. Control tab, window tile, WT, right? And these break out. There's a certain way of selecting these, like if you want this on this side and the other thing on the other side, there's a way of, like if this was selected last, it stays over here or something. I can't quite remember, but there's a, you know, we can Google it in a minute. But there's a way of making things pop up on what side you want them to pop up on. So we'll look at, I'll try and remember what that was, because I obviously don't remember what it is right now. Okay. So there's my 3D view. Here are my levels. Here's my floor plan. And I'm in basement view right now. Okay. And I go over to wall and I choose my footing that is very thick. Footing, foot. Here we go. And this one's pretty easy because I can just pick the midpoint of the foundation wall and that wall will grow right there. But again, I have to define the top and bottom constraints. So the base will be this one, remembered, it was smarter than the first one. Bottom of footing up to basement. I use my pick, wall center line, and I tick, or click, click, tick. I know, tick, tick. There you go. And I'm starting to see them generate over here, right? Click, click, click. I don't remember if I got those ones on the other side. Yep, I did. And there's my footing system. Okay. All right. Easy, right? Now what's really nice about this system that is not as great in the quote structural system is that if I wanted to change this, right? If I wanted to say this relationship right here was, 10 inches. Perfect. And they are assigned to those levels. The top and bottom constraints are assigned to those levels. So when they move, they all move together and it all flexes, right? Which makes sense. So the system works, I guess, essentially, right? Okay. So we have our basement walls. We have our footing walls. Does that make sense? Everybody so far? Till you try it, right?
Well, yeah.
Today, right now, it makes sense. Well, you have the videos, right? Okay, so let's add the basement walls now, right? So I go to my basement and I have this footprint, and now I need to add those walls in there, right? I've got, if I go here, is there a basement floor? Yep, basement floor plan. So I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to hopefully be able to save it somewhere. No? Okay. Let's go to downloads. Okay. I'm going to paste it on my desktop here. There we go. So I'm going to retrieve the image for the basement and I'm going to insert it back into my Revit file, just like I did that first level. Okay, so I'm going to go back to insert and I'm going to go to image and choose my basement and hit open, click, and there it is. Okay. But again, right, it is not quite correct. And so, the nice thing about this is that I have hopefully sized the upper level correctly. Yep.
I'm trying to align. What am I doing wrong? I'm picking that one that turns blue.
Well, you want to pick the top wall first because you want to move it in.
Right.
Yep. Click AL, click. Yep. Down below.
Oh, I don't have my AL on.
AL. Click. Bottom. Click. Good. Well, okay. It worked.
Oh, it's just got the gap. That's why it looks
Yes.
weird.
He's having a little perspective issue where it looked like it hadn't gone in, but it had.
Okay, because I put
Yep.
that extra.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so now, right, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to move it and I'm going to move it to there. And hopefully I'm going to be able to, in fact, I'm going to move it over. I'm going to nudge it with my arrows. There we go, right? Which we can't do in AutoCAD. And what's that?
Never heard of it.
I'm going to create a wall. And it's going to go from here. Oh, we don't want a footing wall because it's growing down. See how it grew down? I want to pick a wall that's going to move upward. So basement up to main level. Okay. And it's going to go to, I think actually I changed my mind. Sorry guys. This is going to go from outer wall to outer wall. So I'm going to move this to my outer wall. There, that makes me feel better. Okay. Because I want the the outer edge of the basement, which is going to be to line up with the outer edge of the basement.
Selecting that point on the picture.
So I didn't snap to it. There wasn't anything special. I just got as close as I could. So I clicked on it, MV, oops, yeah, MV, and I just came in there and zoomed in and clicked on where I thought it was. Again, when you're doing stuff like this, which, I mean, funny enough, you do this all the time. When you're drawing plans and you're doing tenant improvements or remodels or whatever, right? A client comes to you, they've got a giant roll of blueprints from 1974, right? And you scan them all in and you do the best you can. And there's dimensions and it works generally pretty well, right? But you're doing this a lot. You're tracing, you're trying to figure things out. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the wall tool, WA, and I'm going to draw a wall from there all the way out to, you know, where I can approximate that happens. You could probably guess where all this stuff is from the layout above, right? So there's that, but I'm going to scale this up just for the sake of, we want to do it again. Click, click, scale, click, click, and then I'm going to bring it out to, instead of typing a dimension, I'm bringing it out to the dimension I want it to be, right? Click. There we go. Okay, I can delete that wall and I can get this pretty close now. You see that, how it's, ooh, it's a little off. It's a little off, but close enough, right? It gives me, you know, a general sense. I feel like I was better at aligning the upper level than I was the lower level. And so I'm going to call the upper level correct. And this is just going to give me a good general sense of where everything else is lying. That looks like it's significantly out further though.
The photo is not
It could be, yeah, to proportion, yeah, to each other, yeah. And you run into that. So what I would likely do in this instance, I'm going to hide this real quick. I'm going to use my hide element, right? Temporarily hide. And I think I'm going to turn on an underlay an underlay, so that I can see the upper level while I'm still on the lower level, right? So I'm going to come over here to my properties dialog box. The base level is, I want to look at the main level, and I hit apply, and it shows me where things are on the main level, right? Now if I unhide my document here, yeah, I wonder if this is just slightly off. I would assume that they would want to make that line, the structural line right here, maybe in the same spot. That would be my assumption, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter in this case. Because these, how far apart is this? It's good, yeah, okay. Anyway, we have some slight differences, but you know, again, I get what we're doing here. We're guessing a lot, right? So I just want you to make it as close as possible. But then I would come in here and I would draw my walls, right? As best I could. Okay. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to go into 3D. We don't know how to do floors yet, right? And that's okay. We're getting there. But we do know how we're crazy with walls, right? So we have lower level walls, we have upper level walls, we have foundation walls. Does everybody get the idea of how to generate the foundation walls? Do you get the idea of how to generate the foundation walls? Yeah?
We go over it one more time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's do that. Okay. Oop, not those. If I wanted to delete all these, I could tab, delete, tab, click, delete. Okay.
So you left your foundation wall 12 inches wide.
Well, no, not always, right? It's going to be dependent on the conditions and the structural engineer, but I think they're more commonly 8 inches.
Right.
Yeah.
Be almost in line with the upper walls.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to my main level again. When I generate my foundation walls, I want to generate them from the level above, and they'll grow down, right? So I go to wall, open, let me pull up my 3D view, WT. Oh, I've got a lot of things open here. WT. I messed that all up, sorry. Main level, there we go, WT, okay. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to start here on my main level, and they're going to grow downward. And I'm going to choose an actual, defined foundation wall as the wall I'm going to use. So foundation wall, 12-inch concrete. And I'm going to define them to go from the base is my basement. See, remembered, smart. From the basement up to the main level. Where before, and you'll get an error, you'll see a giant gap. It'll say like, you'll get errors sometimes with this, top of wall is lower than bottom of wall or something weird. Or, you know, if you have a negative offset here, which is by default when you first define these. Or this cannot be created in this view, or, you know. So if you get some type of error that says you can't view it because the top is, you know, taller than the bottom or something, it's because of your base and top constraints. So base constraint is basement, base offset 0, top constraint, main level. And I'm going to come over here with my pick. See ya. And I'm going to pick. Click. There it is. Click, click, click. I'm just clicking around. And again, when you've been using AutoCAD for a long time, you're like, it's not precise, it's not there, the walls are off, right? But again, you just have to somewhat get used to that in Revit, knowing that once you generate those, right, you're going to have to go back and align them. You're going to have to revise them. Yep.
Can you just pick like a center of the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll generate automatically?
Well,
The inside actually would be more precise, inside of the wall.
maybe, right? Because if the foundation wall is 8 inches and maybe your upper wall assembly is 12 inches, they could be different enough that you still have to align them. Yeah, so ideally you think, well, yes, they could be close enough that they'll be right on top of each other, but it's rarely the case. They're exactly the same width, and that works. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to line AL, and I click up here, click, 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 click. And again, I'm choosing the border, the boundary, right? I'm not choosing the field. Click, 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 right? So just going around here, click, click, and they all line up. Okay, now it's time to create the footings, right? So I'm going to go to the basement level. Basement. And first of all, there's not a footing wall type generated, so you're going to have to create one. Right? So to create one, you would have taken the wall type closest to what you wanted to generate, right? And you're going to edit type, duplicate, give it a new name. So we'll call this foundation footing, and we'll call it something like, we'll make it, let's see, 24 inches. Okay. Then we have to edit the structure, right? Again, we take an object similar to what we want to generate, we duplicate it, we rename it, we edit the structure to foot, enter, okay, okay, and then we can use it. And this case where you could use the midpoint, this always works, right? Because the foundation walls, well, not always, but in general will be centered on the footing, right? And so that case, it would work, unless you're retaining.
Based on the pictures, right?
Yep. What's that?
I said, not based on the pictures we get to see.
Well,
Spectros will bring back some pretty interesting.
foundation systems.
Yeah, the footings and foundations are. I don't know how Don hasn't gone crazy already.
We've run into some pretty creative ones working. But I mean, in general, like, hopefully it's going to be like this. In theory. We'll say in theory. That's right. I'm going to go WT because I want to see my 3D model, right? I want to make sure that as I'm generating these, they're at least in the right spot. They're not like at the roof line or something, right? So I might still have to realign them, but at least they're not. Oh, something is wrong. Oh, something was wrong. It's because I was looking, right? I forgot to change my constraints. So in this case, Revit was not, let's see, what level? Oh, it's because I'm on the main level instead of the basement level, right? You see how that works? There's a perfect example of what happens when you don't do things right. Okay, so it's still bottom of footing to basement. I was just in the wrong level when I was generating these, and so it didn't create them right. So even though I still get the error, you cannot see these elements in your view. I know that it's okay because they are being generated beneath that foundation wall where they should be.
So should it have, even though you're on the main level, since the constraints were the bottom of the footing and then the bottom, should you still have put it there?
Well, but I don't think I didn't look, but I don't think when I switched to the main level, it switched the constraint to the main level. Yeah. Yeah. So now I look here and I have my footing. Okay. Looks like a footing. I like it. All right, so let's go to our main level. You know, again, I always like to look at things in different ways. Let's go to main level here. Looks pretty good. You know, after you've kind of drawn this, you could either hide it or delete it if you don't feel like you need it anymore. I'm going to draw a little section. Click. There's my section tool up there. And I'm just going to draw a little section through here because I like to admire my work, right? And there you go. There's about 8 hours of work in AutoCAD. Just kidding, not that much, but but everything looks really good, right? I've got my footing here, I've got my foundation wall, I have my exterior wall sitting on top of that, right? Eventually we'll make space for our floor to rest right in there, right? Don't worry about that for now. Although, do you guys want me to show you how to do a floor real quick? Because we have a little time. Or is this enough for tonight?
Concerned about extra knowledge going into my brain.
Do you want to put on frame real quick?
Oh, yep.
On the basement,
Okay.
so you've got all these internal walls that are against the slab.
Right.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't just make those like one solid model, essentially?
The slab and the walls.
Right.
Well, they're different materials.
Right, but you could still define it as the system, right? You could just say your base is the slab, but then you could put fur on the outside.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Do you mean like having a wall on the inside of the foundation?
Right.
Yeah, you could do that.
Just have it all as one unit.
Yes, yeah, so this wall type here, you know, if there is a wall that's furred out, I'm going to hit edit this wall type, and I'm going to hit edit here, and I'm going to add, I'm going to hit insert. That's a really good question, right? And we want it to be on the interior side, so I'm going to move it down. But I'm going to change this to, we'll do the softwood lumber.
Because otherwise you have to create a wall that has sheetrock on just one side and
Right.
the wood, so maybe it would be one.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good question. So here, in that case, and then you could put, you know, here I could add one more. So we'll insert, move it down, change it from structure to finish. Change the material from nothing, to gypsum board. And oh, what did I do? Oh, see, I told you. Look what happens.
It's like, I know that's gonna have to be 6 times.
I know it.
Well, I'm just trying to make the walls, and yeah.
Well, you get used to hitting escape just to clear things out, right? And I told you, right?
There should be an option to say, hey, warn me when I'm being dumb.
I know. Do you really want to exit, right? I know. I agree. I think there should be a little fail-safe here.
Something.
We'll add insert. Or maybe I should just not hit exit or escape 8 times. That might.
There's also that.
Like then there's yes. Okay. I hit OK. OK. And that wall thickens up, right? And you know, right now I'm not seeing the striations of that, but if I change my coarseness level to medium, oop, it's on the wrong side. So this wall's confused. But I'm going to, let's go to the basement level. Okay, and again, coarseness level. Right, so some of the walls are correct, some of them are not. Here's what I'm gonna do, because I really have to flip these to make them correct, but, oh, this is defined down the center. So if my location line is down the center and I flip it, it flips right across the midpoint. Doesn't change the dimensions of the outside or inside, right? But again, if this had been defined as the midpoint on the outside, it would flip that wall, so the dimension was not correct. So I'm just going to go around here and flip these inside. And it looks pretty good. Pretty easy. There you go. Yeah. So that works really well. If you could do that where you could generate the foundation wall and then create another wall type that's a stud with gypsum on one side, right? But the problem with that is that when we go to add windows, The window only recognizes one wall being, and it only cuts into one wall. So you have another wall in front of it, and you have to do a little finagling to get it to look right, right? So this is a good way of doing this.
To make it so you have that per out wall included.
Yes. Yep. Okay. All right. We won't talk about floors yet, but I will show you one quick thing. We'll end on. I'm going to show you how to add some doors and windows in here if you want to get going on doors and windows. Doors and windows are hosted elements, right? Which means they exist in items that are hosts. So walls are hosts, floors are hosts, roofs are hosts. They host items. So a door, for example, if I wanted to create a door, which our door icon is right here, click. I can't just in space click, 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 right? It just doesn't work. I need to hover over, right? Makes sense. I need to hover over something that will host a door, click, and it hosts that door, right? And it trims out this space very nicely. Everything is wonderful.
What about making a smaller door
For the closet?
for the closet?
So the doors come in all sizes, right? If I click on this door, over here in the properties dialog box, I can drop down and I can get a whole bunch of sizes, okay? So 30 inches is the smallest, but if I wanted to go smaller, I'm not gonna get into how to edit, but very easily you can make smaller doors, okay?
Same process as creating new walls.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yep, okay, all right. Edit type, right? Duplicate, give it a new name, so maybe you want this to be, 24 inches. Okay, hit OK. The only difference between this and a new wall is we don't have necessarily the same definitions as a wall where it's this line item type stuff, right? Here we have thickness, height, projection, trim. So any element that has to do with a door or a window or whatever element it is will be apparent there or be there, right? So doors have a height. Well, this height is 7 foot. We wanted to change the width to 24 inches. Hit OK, and now that door is 24 inches, right?
There you go, Donnie.
There you go. I know. Magic, huh?
She just blew your mind.
On the plans, it looks like a barn door. A little bit.
This one?
Yeah.
On the plan, yeah, there's a
Does it look like a barn door?
on the bedroom, yeah, there's.
Oh, on the plan, I was like, that doesn't look like. I was thinking you meant that door. I'm like, how does that look like a barn door? Okay. I was confused. We can talk about that. So we'll have to load some families in to get the barn doors. But essentially, if you wanted to kind of create the swing doors in there for now, you can. Okay. Yep.
So,
Oh.
question. So
Uh-huh.
we did all this, added the 2x4 and all that to the foundation wall,
Uh-huh.
and we changed the wall type.
Right.
Is there a way, because we need to change only one portion of all the walls to get rid of the 2x4, just to have the,
Have one wall without a 2x4 on it.
That little arm.
without creating a new wall type.
This little guy right. Oh.
Just to pick one object and get rid of it.
Yes. So what you did with this, when you created it, you took that original foundation wall, you copied it and edited that. So the original one is still there, right? So I can grab this little piece and I can change that back to the original. Oh no, did I make a copy?
I didn't. So
Okay, you probably followed me and I didn't make a copy. But what I should have done is made a copy of it, and you would just
then we
change
just
it back
change
to the
yeah.
original. But here we can hit edit type, duplicate, and concrete only. We're just making a mess all over the place here, right? Edit, and I can get rid of that lumber, delete. See, there's a perfect example of why you should maintain the original, right? Okay, okay, and it changes just that portion. Yeah, or this little guy too, I guess.
So would you have to split that one or just do either way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, either way, split it or you grab that, hit create similar, and then I could just, oh, basement up to main level, okay. It changes it, changed it after okay. Oh, there's that top of wall error. Basement up to, oh, I'm not in level 2. Okay, that's the problem. Level 1, I mean. Sorry guys, it's getting late. Concrete only. Okay, there we go. and I'd have that little piece, and then I'd go back and just make sure that AL aligned, that it was where it needed to be. Ooh, by changing it, I messed something up there. There we go. Okay. Okay. So you could probably start getting the doors in there, you know, messing around with that. And I don't want to go too far. I feel like this stuff needs to sink in a little bit, so I don't like to do too much information per class because it's just intense. So I think we'll leave it at that. Let me look at my assignment here. Hold on. I'm going to, I can't remember if I know I had some grayed out things. Let's look. Your wall types, main level walls. Okay, so I'm going to create a new assignment, which I have not done yet, and the assignment will be to add the basement walls and the footings, and that's it. I won't add, if you want to add the doors, that's great, but I won't include that. So I'll create a new assignment, the residence, and we'll call it, you know, the basement walls or something to that effect. And we'll make that due a week from today. So we'll make that the 7th. Sound good? Okay.
Feels better.
Feels better. Good, good. All right. Oh, I need to stop recording.